What up, Benny?
Too big for us.
It's big time.
Wow, I'm trying to process the erotic Brussels sprouts myself right now. So,
Yeah,
wow,
Ben.
pretty...
I mean, I think I'm gonna move to another studio and do the rest of the show. Dude's a little weird.
Yeah, no, I will say as an adult, I've come to appreciate Brussels sprouts more. That maybe this is part of my own journey, but I haven't gotten as far as JP has with appreciating them. I'll say that much.
It's been a long journey from Milan to Minsk. All right. Standig covers the Commanders for the Athletic. All right. Tomorrow is the beginning of rookie minicamp. They have overhauled this roster significantly. What do the Commanders got now?
Well, I mean, I think, in totality, they have, a really brand new roster. It's like basically half the roster from last year is gone. And, it's so hard to say, like, we can say like it's turning the page, but when you factor in like everything that's happened, that the changes literally from ownership down over the last year, I mean, it really is, a culmination of how much has flipped here. And now that you have, this young player in Jaden Daniels who, I don't want to go face of the franchise just yet, but obviously that's where this is headed if things work out right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have, I've been saying for a while that all the moves they've made going all the way back to before even free agency started are not really about 2024, the season. It's really about 2025 and beyond. This was really just a complete recalibration of what the roster was, the locker room, tone, everything that sort of they stand for is starting over. And, they have a roster right now that's like, I don't know. I mean, if Jaden Daniels hits the CJ Stroud level, who knows? But that's like the longest of, that's like the longest of shots just based on history. But they have this is like a chance for Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, Josh Harris, et cetera, to turn this completely around, like I just said. So I think that's, to me, what the biggest takeaway is. It's not like who's going to be the left tackle or how are they going to play all the defensive backs. And all these types of things are interesting. But I'm just saying, like, it's a much bigger picture than just, like, sort of getting ready for week one.
All right, Jaden Daniels going to be talked about more than anybody out there. And we all know that he has to play well if this team is going to get where they're going. But I also believe that other people got to do their jobs better. What's the next position you feel or positions need to play better for him to be able to reach his full potential?
Well, I mean, look, certainly the offensive line is a major factor. The group wasn't particularly good last year per se, but I also think they probably were a bit blown up too much because, as we discussed at the time, Sam Howell's penchant for holding the ball in the pocket and, whatever was going on with, the enemy. It was just, it was just a weird hodgepodge. It probably wasn't on any one person. But that said, you have this new group now. They added Tyler Biotish at center. Hopefully that stabilizes that spot. You've got Sam Cosme. The other three spots are a little more up in the air. Again, you can't fix all your problems in one day, but in terms of Daniels in particular, that's obviously where a huge component is going to be. I'm also going to sort of throw out there Jahan Dotson in the sense that, like, you've got Terry McLaurin. I think we kind of know what that is. I think like Dotson does it feels like a little bit more of a wild card. His numbers last year weren't particularly good. He struggled based on certain metrics to get open. And again, there was so much confusion going on last year with this team that it's hard. I don't want to like put any like blame or onus or anything on any of the individual players for the most part. Mm-hmm. But what is Dotson to a degree? Like, is he going to be a legitimate number 2 receiver like we kind of were seeing in the first year, or do they have to consider getting more help at some point? I just think that's going to be so fascinating to see because there's so much to like about him, but at the same time, production is what production is, and Jaden Daniels is going to have his playmakers help him make plays. Simple as that.
For sure. And I think, I kind of did a look at the roster, not necessarily like a 53-man projection, because I think it's just a little silly at this point because there's going to be injuries. There's going to be all kinds of stuff that happens, right? But like the depth in a lot of areas that'll matter for a rookie quarterback, I'm not sure is there. And perhaps we shouldn't be surprised because they were 4-13 last year with no Pro Bowlers. But people talk about, I think it was really exemplified by the lack of work the Bears did to like support Justin Fields. And so that I feel like for young quarterbacks, the situation has become so vital. Like I think I was always a Jaden ahead of Drake guy, but for the Drake crowd, I don't know that you'll get a chance to see what that kid has because I think the Pats are really bad. What kind of situation do you think Jaden is getting here?
I mean, I hate being like the wishy-washy. It's so hard to know. But, again, like I think one thing that Dan Quinn said at Jaden Daniels' press conference was interesting, and that is certainly there's a curve when you're just coming from the NFL or from college football to the NFL, right? Obviously, there's an adjustment period. But at least in this case, the entire offense is learning a new system with Cliff Kingsbury coming in. And Quinn was saying that sometimes it's a challenge when you have a rookie come in to an already established situation. You're having to, as coaches, teach two different classes, a master's class as well as like a one-on-one level class. Here, everybody's going to be kind of on the same page in terms of Cliff Kingsbury's offense. The pros, the vets have been around it for a bit longer, but nothing like too dramatic. So I think from that perspective, Daniels can come in and kind of be on the same page with these guys in terms of learning this specific offense. Obviously, the vets have more experience across the board. So I think that's something that oddly is going to help Daniels. But at the same time, I mean, you got new starters everywhere. You've got a new coach, not to mention obviously a new head coach. It's just really hard to know what he has. I think, if Cornelius Lucas and Andrew Wiley and Dodson and, whatever they figure out at tight end, if that's a healthy Zach Ertz or Ben Sinnott is coming in, all these pieces, if they all hit, I think could give Daniels, all the support he needs. But, it's hard to sit here in, the beginning of May and say that, because how do we know? All right. I mean, that's the whole thing. How do we know that anything is going to work as quickly as maybe you would think that it's got to work for the rookie quarterback? We'll see. Look, it's all curious. I think that's the other big thing with this KP and BMitch is like between the two coordinators, I don't, we don't really know what they're going to do yet. Are they taking the pieces they now have and adjusting everything to them? Are they saying, here's what we're doing and everybody's going to have to figure out a way? I think they'll adjust to the personnel, but at the same time, everything is, completely different. So we have to see what it is. Kingsbury has already said, don't call the offense the air raid. Joe Witt has said, if you're just looking at what we did last year in Dallas, you're going to get it wrong. Okay, well, great.
What does
that exactly mean?
Well, I think what I heard Jaden Daniels talking to Keyshawn said that he, in his conversation with Cliff Kingsbury, he's been telling him to throw some ideas to him, which every time we've received a new coach offensively, they talked about how their scheme was going to fit people. This already seems to be how we're going to make sure we do things that our quarterback likes and the people around him. That's different already, which I think should make a difference.
Although I agree with that. I always used to, my longtime comparison was, Joe Gibbs at 0-5 sees, okay, I got to stop with this Eric Coryell thing. We've got this running back. We've got a better offensive line than people think. Let's lean into that, as opposed to say Steve Spurrier, who's got the fun and gun, is like, this is what we're doing. And I do think last year,
Steve Spurrier,
look, it was a tough situation. Right. I do think last year it was a tough situation across the board, but like Eric Bieniemy, clearly the first 7 or 8 games of the year came in with a plan that he was going to run regardless of what else was happening, which is why Sam Howell was throwing on a pace to have more passes thrown than any quarterback in the 21st century, or at least the team did, and that was insane considering he's basically a rookie playing behind an offensive line that, was not the Hogs, all that stuff. So yeah, hopefully Kingsbury comes in and does what I would view as a smart thing. And I think sounds like you guys would as well. Figure out what you have and adjust to that. Obviously, Jaden is the first and foremost part to that, since he's at the position, the centerpiece, and the investment they just made is massive, obviously, and they want him to succeed in every way possible. So yeah, hopefully they do that. I guess the good thing is Daniel's skill set and what we think of a Kingsbury offense do mesh very nicely. So now it's just a matter of finding the plays that work for him, finding the situations that help promote what his abilities are and limit potential weaknesses for him and the line in particular. So the marriage feels good, but yeah, now we just have to see how they actually execute it.
Yep. Kind of you mentioned, I know you had a story maybe last week or earlier this week. You teased it on your Twitter profile at Ben Standig. You had a position switch that I found interesting, as well as phase 3 of free agency. When do we think phase 3 of free agency is kind of, okay, teams have drafted players, so they might release some veterans at the same position. Kind of starts happening OTAs through June 1st, like probably the next month or so. You think, I look at wide receiver and I look at O-line as positions they might want to look at. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the offensive line part makes sense. I'm not as freaked out about the tackle situation as others, at least in terms of, I just don't think there was as many options that people that were available to them even from the start, even if they just gone and gotten the quote unquote best tackle in free agency. I just don't think there was as many options as people think. I think, and Brian can probably speak to this, I think there's some vets out there who are like, look, I'm not showing up until we get through like OTAs because I don't really want to do that stuff.
A lot of them doing
I'll
that.
show up yeah. So right. So I don't know how much, I don't know how quickly somebody will show up if they do add vets at either of those spots. But yeah, adding another body. Everybody's focused on, can you do better than Cornelius Lucas? I'm kind of focused on, can you do better than Trent Scott? If they can get somebody who's maybe at what we perceive of Lucas, that have that depth or competition, I think that would be good. I just don't think you're going to get somebody who's like demonstrably better. That's an obvious week 1 starter or a tackle, or they wouldn't be still a free agent. Receiver is interesting though, right? Because they draft Luke McCaffrey. It feels like he's positioned to be the slot receiver sooner than later, assuming he can make that adjustment quickly. But then after that, it's kind of wide open. I mean, De'Ami Brown, it just still hasn't kind of clicked over time. They add OZ. I got to say that, learn how to say that name better. They add him. He's had some production in the league, but he's a 5'8" receiver. Are they going to add more there? I can see that. I do think like running back, tight end, they're probably set in terms of training camp. So yeah, receiver, offensive line, I agree, are probably the 2 spots if they're going to add something on offense that I could see. You mentioned the position switch. This is just me sort of speculating a little bit, but this team drafted Ricky Stromberg in the 3rd round last year, and by all accounts, it was a pretty good selection. He didn't even play center though last year, just sort of odd the way the timing worked out. But he was playing some left guard, then he gets hurt and misses the year. They didn't draft a guard. They did sign at Nick Allegretti, but he was a backup last year with Kansas City, so I don't know that he's like being viewed as Russ Grimm or anything. But
you can buy his jersey on the website.
Oh yeah,
they're legitimately selling Nick Allegretti jerseys.
At least you can buy that while you're waiting for the Jaden Daniels jersey reveal.
The number drama intrigue. What if we get there tomorrow and nobody has a number?
It's going to be number 5.
Eventually he will. It sure seems.
I think he's going to get 5. Trent's going to get a nice little payday. And Trent is a nice guy. And he's going to probably go back to a number he had before, and he's going to be bombing it again.
I heard a story last night.
Baghdad.
Do you know that when Eli Manning was drafted by the Giants, Jeff Fiegels wore number 10 and had been there a long time? And who wore number 10 when the season opened for the Giants? Eli.
Was Jeff gone?
I don't know.
Jeff got paid. I guarantee you Jeff got paid.
I believe that to be
the
case.
You want this number? This is the price.
Yeah. Yeah. Benny, what's your position switch theory?
Well, I mean, just the fact that, like I said, they didn't draft a guard to compete with or help back up. The only other guard, right, is kind of like Chris Paul, who he's played a bit the last couple of years, but I don't know that it's been like particularly impressive. They did sign this another center, Michael Dieter, right, who's been in the league for a little bit. So
Another
I'm just like
Wisconsin
looking at
guy,
like,
right?
well, I think that's right, yeah. So I'm just looking at Stromberg, like, okay, well, I mean, I'll assume that Adam Peters assumed he was like a late day 2 pick last year as well, and therefore there's something there that he's obviously not playing center, barring injuries, which here who knows, can't rule that out. But so what is he going? What are they going to do with him? So I'm kind of wondering if there's like again, maybe competition is too strong of a word, but what do you do to use this guy's potential? And I think guard would be the logical move. And like I said, he was a 3rd round pick, and Allegretti was a guy who was a backup, obviously on a very good team, but a backup nonetheless for the Chiefs. So it seems conceivable to me that if Stromberg can make that adjustment, that he could legitimately play that spot. So I do kind of wonder if that's something they have in the cards for him. We will need to see where he's at with his recovery from surgery. But last time we saw him, it seemed like it was heading in the right direction. So I think that one I'm just sort of intrigued by as a way to maximize some of the talent they already have.
You have guys on this team that have practiced well. They get in the games. They don't do much. You have guys that we keep waiting for them to break out. What would be your message to them this year?
I mean, I think the one thing about this roster in general is it should be pretty wide open, right? I mean, normally when we come into these scenarios, whether it's because of draft status or salary or experience, and a lot of the depth chart, not saying there can't be movement, but a lot of the depth chart is kind of already set, and you're just kind of filling around it. I think for here, I mean, I think I don't think there's that much set across the board, and I think there's opportunities for some guys to, remove the perception or change the perception of what it was that they were before. And, I think the part that's probably not being discussed as much with this group is how much have they improved with the coaching staff? I just think that, when Ron Rivera showed up and we talked about the term JP coined eventually the Commanders and all the people he brought on board, and it was a bit much, et cetera. But to me, it was more about once changes started to happen, they were just promoting from within rather than bringing in sort of the best you could get at a lot of these position slots. Defensive back last year, I think, was a really obvious one. Now you have a completely new staff. All these guys, not that they're not all fired up, but you know what I mean? Like, this is a second chance for Dan Quinn. This is a promotion for Joe Witt Jr. This is for Cliff Kingsbury, a shot to get back in the league, and maybe he still has head coaching aspirations, I imagine, and all these position coaches. It feels like this is I don't know if better is the right word, but maybe I'll just say it feels like it's a better group top to bottom. And if they can get more out of these guys, whether it's Emmanuel Forbes after last year or finally unlocking that De'Ami Brown we've seen in some off seasons, but it hasn't really translated enough to games, guys like that's where this thing could be a better year than we think. Even with, say, bringing Jeremy Chin in, who was the runner-up for Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2020, and getting him back to a level that reminded people of that version versus the guy who's kind of, been battling some injuries and just it was a bad fit for Carolina last year, et cetera. I think if this coaching staff can, do what they're supposed to do at the level that I think a lot of people are anticipating, I think that's where really you could see a lot of improvement. And again, especially with specific players getting more out of them that we just haven't seen so far.
Benny, thank you for the time, buddy.
Man,
I'll see you tomorrow.
Appreciate you.
Always a pleasure, guys. See ya.